Hello and welcome to the Built Around You podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you build, renovate, or upgrade your home. Why is building a home so complex and stressful? Why do building projects run over time and budget? Welcome to the podcast Built Around You. Hello and thanks for joining us. On today's show, we have a little bit of a hybrid feature. We're going to be joined by Owen Kelly. Owen has built his own home in Dunamore, just outside Blarney. Started work in 2018. Owen will share his story and how he went about building his home. Did an awful lot of the work himself. But Owen is also an expert, or becoming an expert in PV panels, photovoltaic panels, which I know is a massive growing industry at the moment. And I get an awful lot of questions on my Instagram at Kieran KMC about photovoltaic. I'm just getting photovoltaic fitted to my own house as well, full disclosure. So I'm very keen to know about how they work, about how the efficiencies are, the payback time, and all these questions that everyone's probably thinking about now in light of the energy crisis. So let's dig in and find out a little bit more. Hello, Owen, and you're very welcome to the Built Around You show.
Hi, Kieran. Thanks for having me on. I think the podcast is great. I'm really happy to be part of it. I wish it was here when I was building my house because I would have had hundreds of questions for you.
Thank you very much for your very kind words. I'm admiring your wonderful guitar collection in the background. I used to be a huge guitar player, a little bit less so now, but I pick up the acoustic in the sitting room here and there when I get a bit of inspiration. What kind of music do you do?
So mostly playing in bands throughout Ireland, cover bands. So it would be a blend of things like rock, funk. Occasionally, I'll pick up my violin and play a bit of classical. I have huge aspirations to learn jazz, but that's a work in progress, as we say.
What's the setup? Is it like you're a session musician, or are you in various bands, or how does that work?
In various bands, really. I have one or two bands that I would be involved in as a core, and then every now and again somebody out there will get a cold or have a holiday book they forgot about, and they'll need somebody to fall in for them, and I'll stand in then on occasion if I need to.
And how long does it take to learn the material, or would you happen to know most of it already? Or
You know a lot of it already. Somewhat ironically, all the bands in Ireland tend to play very similar music. It's just different faces playing the same stuff. But if you do need to learn stuff, it doesn't take too long. If you had a gig booked in on a Saturday, you'd probably pick up the guitar on a Thursday and learn the material. So not too long.
as long as there isn't a big slap bass solo in the middle of it, I suppose, is there?
Pretty much, pretty much.
Okay. So you've built a house near Dunamore, just outside Blarney in Cork, I believe. When did all this start?
Well, it started really in 2018 for us. We had decided that we would love to build a house. We had been looking on the market at that stage, my partner Monica and myself, and we were half considering trying to buy the house we were renting, and then we were looking at the prices houses were going for, and we thought, maybe we can find a way to build a house, somewhere in the countryside, maybe a little bit bigger than what we would have in terms of buying out the rental house and not spend any more money. And it seemed like a pie in the sky dream. And we spent about 3 or 4 months driving around on weekends looking at various sites that we'd found on Daft. And pretty soon we realized that there's restrictions on sites and you have to be living in the area to buy a site sometimes. And then we happened by accident upon a site within a village here in Dunamore. And because it's within a village, there were none of the local restrictions. So it meant we would be eligible if we got the planning pass to live there. So we put a deposit down in 2018, subject to planning, put in a planning application, got it approved, and completed sale of the site, I think, in September 2018. And then we started organizing the house. Well, truth be told, we had half organized the house already, but we gave it the green light to go ahead. And as you had alluded to, our house is probably a little bit different to most. Our house came from Sweden. So we ordered the house from a company in Galway called Scandinavian Homes. And the reason we did that is both my brother and sister had previously gotten homes from them as well, but they live in Galway. And if you live in Galway, the Scandinavian Homes will do the whole lot for you because it's local. They'll give you a turnkey operation. But being in Cork, that's not really feasible to get a builder to come down from Galway every week and stay in hotels and go back up again. So what they do, if you're outside of Galway, is they supply a shell kit. So they'll come and they'll do the foundation. They'll put up the outside perimeter walls with all the windows and doors installed. They'll do some of the roof structure, and they will give you materials to help you finish the inside. But you're pretty much on your own. So if you can imagine it, this house goes up in kind of 2 weeks. You're given a key, and when you open up the front door, it's one giant empty room inside full of materials and an instruction manual. So, like the worst IKEA project you could ever imagine.
Okay. But I suppose the good benefit is, like, I mean, there's nothing more daunting than arriving in a field and going, right, I'm going to make this field into my garden and house and all that, because where do you start? You have to bring on a site works excavation company. You've got to, first of all, mark everything out and get all your levels right and your setting out right. Then dig it out, set up all your temporary site facilities and health and safety and all that, and then start digging it out and make sure you're doing everything in the right sequence and you're complying with all the different regulations. You have the engineer coming and going and everything else. Because when you're starting from nothing and you have nothing set up, setting it all up correct and not carrying any errors is of course a huge difficulty and something that you're looking to sidestep. I suppose the benefit of getting a setup like you have, like this company went in, Scandinavian Home Company came in, they did the foundations, they set up the outer perimeter, the shell basically of the building of your home. And they put in the windows and got the roof structure going. So I suppose you had the external envelope shell in place, and now it was a matter of filling in all the blanks and fitting all the internal structures that came with the shell or the package. So I suppose at least you had the benefit of some of the major setting out done. So they left you a big kit of materials and a load of internal works. Where did you start there, and what were you able to do yourself?
So there were some things we had to get help with. I enjoy DIY, but I wouldn't be a builder. So the first thing I sat down was, and created a sort of a list of things I think I can do, things I know I can't do, things I'm not allowed to do. So things you're not allowed to do would be things like the electrician. You need to get somebody to come in and do that. Um, Things I can't do. At the time, I couldn't do plumbing. It turns out I can now, but I had to get a plumber in to help me out with kitting up the house. We had to get somebody to make us stairs because that's quite an intensive carpentry job. And apart from the groundworks, which you mentioned already, then the last person we got in was a local contractor to put up our roof and install our Velux windows for us. But everything else we took on. So everything else would be things like all of the first and second fix carpentry, putting in the ventilation system, putting in the air tightness membrane. I guess project managing to an extent. We installed the kitchen, we did the tiling, we fit the bathroom ware, we built uh, saunas, we hung doors, we put in all the smart home accessories, we put down wooden flooring, um, trimmed out all the doors, everything else like that. So it's been a hell of a learning experience. It's been an expensive tool buying journey as well.
Okay.
Um,
Which you can justify if you're doing all that level of work, yeah.
Absolutely going to justify. But the upside of it was we when we sat down and we worked it out because we did all our plastering and stuff ourselves as well. And when we worked it out, we think we saved somewhere around about between 40 to maybe 45,000 euros. And instead of doing the sensible thing and putting that in our back pocket, it allowed us to build a slightly bigger house than we would have had originally.
Okay. And there's a huge benefit to that forever, and no one can take that from you. When you say we, who's the we?
I'm glad you asked. I think I exploited every single friend and family member I had. So I very much learned by doing. So when I was reading the manual and it was describing how to do stud walls and things like that and load bearing walls, I was very lucky that my partner Monica, her brother, worked in construction in Norway. And he came to visit for 2 weeks, and he showed me how to do a wall. And then all of a sudden, I knew how to do walls. And then he showed me how to do some other construction work, and that was great. My brother came; he showed me how to do tape and joint plastering. He showed us how to do tiling. So you're picking up all these skills, and once you're shown how to do something, off you go. But truthfully, without the help of friends and family, we would have been um, taking a lot longer to learn how to do the techniques. And even though YouTube is great, it's no substitute for somebody literally coming and showing you how to do things. So we still did quite a lot of the work ourselves, most of it, in fact. But it was just having that safety net of being able to ask somebody. And actually, the company that supplied the house as well, they were open to FaceTime calls with their construction crew. So if you came across a puzzle or your roofer had a question, you could FaceTime their crew, and a lot easier to explain things when you can see it rather than trying to describe it over the phone. So that was actually really reassuring.
And were there any moments, like you're painting a very rosy picture there, but was there any moments when you got to a stage and going, geez, I'm in trouble here now. I've either gone too far or not far enough, but something's wrong. Has there been any brick wall moments?
There was a couple of things, all right, where you're just, it seems like an insurmountable task, and there's too much going on. I installed the heat recovery ventilation system into the home. I'd never done that before. And it was quite a lot of working out complex angles and cutting pipes and bonding them together and so on. But because I was working around a day job, I was essentially on the site here at weekends and nights. That just dragged on for about a month, I think. And there was a point I was like, am I ever going to get this finished? But we got there in the end, which wasn't too bad. But things like that, there's some jobs you'll get done in half a day, and there's some jobs that will take 3 or 4 weeks to complete.
And how long did the whole project take? From when the timber frame company installed the frame, or I suppose from when they broke ground first to you moving in, what was that time frame?
So the foundation was done very, very late November 2018. So that was done, poured, it's a raft foundation. So that was done in about 4 days, I think, from start to finish. They left that settled for a week, and then two trucks arrived with the house about a week later. So kind of middle of December, the house structure went up. That took 4 days as well. So there's a couple of shocked neighbors driving past going, there's a house, there wasn't a house yesterday, where did that come from? Um, and then we left it sort of sit there for Christmas because, we were exhausted having gone through all of that, and we just needed to mentally take a break. And then we picked it back up again at the end of January when the roofer came to slate the roof and install the Felix windows. And then we just went pretty much gung ho at it after that. We moved in almost a year to when the house arrived. That was Christmas 2019. And again, that was just working weekends, nights, any holidays I could get from work. Was the house finished when we moved in? Absolutely not. We slept on a mattress on the floor for the first 4 months of having the house. There were some rooms I still hadn't plastered. There were some doors still not hung, some flooring still not put down. But it was enough to allow us to move in, stop paying a mortgage, and rent at the same time. So that was great for us.
That's incredible. There are some builders that would take a year to finish the house. No, I suppose they would have it largely finished. There wouldn't be rooms unfinished. But for ye to achieve what ye have achieved, and you're having to learn a lot of these things from scratch, our YouTube, our house building podcasts, and do all the work in the evening, buying tools as you go, our weekends and holidays and everything else. So it's a fantastic achievement to have moved in as quickly as you have, and to save the money. And as you say, look, just build a bigger house. But again, that is effectively saving money because you're building equity into the house. And tell me, the house, what kind of energy rating would the house be now at the end of all that, or what kind of energy setup had you? What was your strategy there to get your BER sorted?
Well, funny enough, I don't actually have a BER. I've done none of that, and I do need to get around to sorting it out. But there's similar houses that have gone through the BER process, and I guess it's a good segue to talk about the challenges in terms of this type of build. So technically, this house is built to a passive standard. All of the walls are mostly made of insulation. There's, I think, about 210 millimeters of insulation in the walls. All of the interior walls are insulated. The foundation is insulated. The attic is completely full of insulation. It's cellulose pumped in. So there's like, I think, nearly 600 meters or 600 millimeters of insulation in the attic, and 400 millimeters all the way down the eaves of the roof. So the house is essentially one big insulation pod with living space on the inside. Energy wise, we had some hurdles to cross because every time we talked to a bank about a mortgage or talked to a home insurer about insuring it, one of the first questions was, well, hey, what kind of heating system have you put into the house? And the answer to that is none. So we don't have central heating. We have heat recovery ventilation, which works very, very well for about 40 to 43 weeks of the year. I think it keeps the house at a relatively stable temperature. This morning, it was at 18 degrees when we got out of bed, and that's not with any heating on for the last few days. But it does get cold in the depths of winter. Like any house, it'll drop down to about 15 degrees. And when that happens, we have a few options. So we put electrical underfloor into our wet rooms, so our downstairs bathroom and our utility room. That's there if we want it. We used it for the first year and then thought, yeah, it's not really making much of a difference. The house is still warm. And then last year, because we had a little money left over, we installed a wood burning stove that's fed with an external air supply, again, just to try and keep all of the envelope inside the house warm. So we do tend to crank that up maybe 2 weeks of the year, but because the house is so efficient, you can burn that for an hour. Heat recovery will keep that heat going through the house, and honestly, it kind of gets the house going for 2 days. So what I'm trying to segue into then is with the BER, where we hit a wall, is we started talking to some engineers about BERs. And the advice we were getting is that, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, you can slap me on the wrist if I'm wrong, but they were saying that we would need to have heaters installed in the rooms for the BER software to be able to calculate, an actual rating, because the fact that the house has no central heating, it doesn't play well with the software that calculates the BER by all accounts. So, long way of saying, the house is super efficient. I would imagine it would be somewhere like an A2 or an A1. But we do need to get a BER done at some point, because if you want to remortgage the house in a year or two and you want to go with a green mortgage, we're going to have that.
So, I mean, you wouldn't be the first person I've come across actually who has gone a little bit off piste when it comes to the energy setup of your house. I came across another individual 2 years ago who was building a timber frame house, and whereas they bought into the idea of an air to water system, they weren't 100% convinced they needed it. So they super insulated the house. They they brought the air tightness up to a very high level, and they installed heat recovery ventilation. They installed a stove, and they first fixed an air to water system. So they have it potentially in place if they ever need to use it, and if they decide it's so cold and they aren't able to maintain enough heat during the depths of winter, they can actually fit the indoor unit, fit the external unit, and off they go. No, they haven't yet done it, to my knowledge. So I suppose there's a somewhat similar approach to years. I like the idea of the stove and the heat recovery unit. Now, you made an important point there when you said the air intake for the stove is external, so it's maintaining a high level of air tightness local to it. I suppose your heat recovery ventilation unit then is spreading, like a stove is going to send heat out local in that room, but your heat recovery ventilation unit then, I guess, is actually spreading the heat throughout the house. So that's a very important factor, because otherwise you'll have a very warm room and a very cold house thereafter. Like you had all that set up. Is there any other energy efficient elements that you installed either then or after?
I guess just we took a holistic view at the energy use of the house then at that stage. There were a couple of things that were important to us. Hot water efficiency was one of them. So we put in one of these Joule tanks that once you heat it, it keeps the water warm for quite some time. And then we started looking at the overall energy consumption of the home. So what did that look like? And essentially, it all boils down to electricity usage. That's where all of our energy comes from. So, we don't have gas, we don't have oil, we don't have anything like that. We have one energy source, which is electricity. But our first concern then was, how do we maximize the use of that and how do we get the best benefit from it? Enter part L of the planning regulations, where you have to have some form of renewable. And I thought, well, why don't we just do something with solar, and tick two boxes? So meet the planning regulations and then try and become more energy efficient.
So, Owen, you obviously had a lot of research done. You got to the stage where you were happy these were going to make to offer some value and be of benefit to your current setup. So, what was your next step? You got them installed.
But we got the panels on the roof first. So that was very straightforward. The guys came with scaffolding. They clambered up the scaffolding with the panels, and about 3 hours later, our roof was just clad in these panels sitting there with the cabling brought into the home. Then we got our house connected to electricity, which was great. The first time the house came alive, and it, morphed from being a construction site to being a home. I think that's always a good moment. Um, we got the solar installers to come back and fit the rest of the system then at that stage for us and commission it and get it all up and running.
My God! And so you quite quickly then began to see some of the benefits of your system, I guess. And I believe subsequent to this, then you create a little bit of a Facebook following for people who fitted similar systems. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the things about Facebook that is actually quite good are Facebook groups. There's groups out there for everything, and I think people don't use them enough. Things like woodworking and musicians and the whole lot. But there wasn't any real groups for people in Ireland who were using solar. There were groups already for people who were driving EVs, and some of those guys had solar, but there was nothing specific to solar. So we set up a very small group, and it was originally intended for a few of us, just to sort of get together and talk about the systems we had, one specific brand, and share knowledge. Um, and other people started joining with other systems. And at the start, we were thinking, do we really want to diversify? Do we want to spread out and have all this other stuff, or do we want to keep it on the systems? And we thought, you know what? Let's take a risk. Let's open it up and see what happened. And it kind of chugged along. We were getting 100 members, 200 members, 1,000 members. And in March of this year, we were at 3,000 members, feeling pleased as punch with ourselves, thinking, wow, this is huge. Never thought it would get this big. Um, and then the energy crisis happened. And from March, where we had 3,000 members, it's now December and we have 35,000 members.
My God.
So that'll give you an idea. We were adding essentially 1,000 members a week at one point there. All people coming in with, is the system I'm buying, good value for money? Are the components, good components to be using? How can I get the best out of my system? And a real knowledge share among owners. So it's not installers coming in making sales pitches. It's owners supporting each other peer to peer, advising each other on where to go, and people on every step of the journey, from day one, I don't know what I'm doing, to people who have a system in place and they're trying to troubleshoot it.
Well, I suppose you've given us a sense of the different components. So, how does the whole system work?
Great question. So the first thing you have to consider is how much energy your house is using at any moment in time. So your house has big and small energy consumers. Your big energy consumers are things you would expect them to be: your oven, your induction hob, your kettle. Little energy users would be things like maybe charging your phone and so on. But it all adds up, right? And your house at any moment in time during the day could be using, when you're not cooking, it could be using like 300 watts an hour. And then at dinner time, when you're cooking, you could be up to 7 kilowatts an hour.
You're cooking with electric.
If you're cooking with electric, or if you have an electric shower, it's higher again. So your demand will go up and down during the day based on what you're using. And the idea then is that you generate electricity to cover that demand. So your panels on the roof are basically receiving the sunlight in, they're converting that to electricity. That varies. So on an overcast day like today, you might have enough just to kind of run the house and cover your basic electricity needs. On a very bad raining day, you might have very poor electricity coverage. And on a hot summer's day, you could be generating so much electricity that your house actually isn't using it. So you're making all this power, and all that power has to go somewhere. And that's where the systems we were talking about come into place. So I guess, first of all, at the basics, your panels make electricity. Your house tries to use that electricity first. That's always the way it goes. Your house tries to use the electricity you're generating, so you get it for free. And if there's leftover electricity, you as the owner can figure out where you want that to go. So you have three choices really. Actually, no, you have four, I think. So you can send it back to the grid, which is the default, that it goes back to ESB and it goes to your neighbor's house or their neighbor's house. And thankfully now we're starting to see that you're getting paid for that money if you send electricity back to the grid. You can put it into your hot water. So this house here has an immersion. We're all going back to immersions now, which is kind of funny, but it's a smart immersion. So if there's any leftover electricity that the panels are generating that the house isn't using, it dumps it into the hot water tank, and then we have free hot water for 9 or 10 months of the year, which is phenomenal. Or you can, if you choose to install a battery in your home, you can put that power into the battery. And the reason you would do that is that when the sun goes down and your panels are no longer generating electricity, any extra electricity you put into the battery during the day can then run your home at night. And then, of course, your last option, if you have an electric car and you're generating extra electricity, is you can just dump the electricity into your car, so that your next trip to the shops will be for free as well.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people look at all the different options and they don't know, should I get batteries? Should I sell it back to the ESB? How much are they paying and all that? So I suppose this is when I was looking at them for my own house, this was the learning I had to work out. My first question, because I'd looked at PV panels years ago, and I was always of the view that the technology was rapidly improving year on year, and it was a matter of, I'm definitely going to get it, but when am I going to get it? And I had been putting it off because I thought, even though I'm losing out on the benefits of it, I think, but the later you buy it, the better it'll be. Obviously, now we've gotten to the stage now with the unfortunate war in Ukraine, that all our energy prices have become so high that we're now all forced to, beyond making our house as efficient as it is, and clearly you've done all that. It's now, well, how can we generate the little bit of power that we do need for our heating systems, or for our houses. I suppose the one benefit for me with photovoltaic is, like, you look at a lot of houses and they go, well, look, I'd like to make it more efficient, so I'm thinking of adding air to water, and I'm going, yeah, but look, it's an old stone house. That's a colossal the price and to install it. It may or may not work with the current setup of your house with your envelope and all that, and it's going to be extremely invasive. You'll have to move out. Every house, as we know, needs electricity, so you can add PV to nearly any house. And of course, we're all at the stage now where, irrespective of whether the system's going to get slightly better next year or not, the attraction of actually of fitting it is so immense now, because of our rapidly increasing electrical bills, as well as everything else. It's becoming nearly a must do at some level. And is it fair to say that if you don't have the budget to install the full system to meet your full base load of your house, you could install a smaller system at maybe a lower budget, or maybe you don't have the roof space to at least make some dent on your electrical bills?
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Kieran. Ultimately, while it's great to talk about, having a green source of energy, for most people, the driving factor is going to be bringing down their costs. I think that's a really important point. Can you install a smaller system and upgrade it later? You absolutely can. There's nothing stopping you doing that, apart from trying to get an installer back to expand the system. That's actually quite challenging, because there is such an amount of people queuing now to get new systems in at the moment. The installers are preferring to go out and have a day where they make more money than to have a day where they travel off to somebody and fit three panels onto an existing system. I think that will change in a year or two. I think that'll swing around when that initial demand is gone. So if somebody wanted to install a smaller system today and then plan in 2 or 3 years' time to add more panels, I think that's a shrewd move. The most important two things I would say to anybody considering a system is, First of all, fit as many panels as you can afford and as your roof will take. And as we know, the planning restrictions for homes now are gone. You can fit as many panels as you want, as long as you don't live next to an airport. But for most people, they can fit as many panels as they want now, which is wonderful news. So my advice, fit as many panels as you can, as you can afford. But the second piece of the puzzle, really, I think that's super important, is the type of inverter that you fit. So we said earlier, the inverter is the brain of the system that controls everything. There's two types on the market. There are standard inverters, which are designed to work with panels only, and there's a hybrid inverter. So the hybrid inverter is a tiny bit more expensive. We're not talking thousands of euros, we're talking hundreds. But the hybrid inverter will give you the flexibility that if you want to add a battery in 2 years' time, you can do that. You can't do that with the standard inverter. So I think really important, as many panels as you can, and a hybrid inverter at a minimum. And then you're set up for success after that if you want to expand your system.
Yeah, I mean, the basic setup is to get as many panels as you can afford, get your, as you said, your hybrid inverter, and you're set up then pretty much for generating an amount of electricity. If you're generating too much, you can sell an amount of it back to the grid. The price you're getting from the ESB or your energy supplier at the moment isn't fantastic, but we all believe it'll improve. I'm sure the government is putting pressure on these energy suppliers to improve it, or at least I hope they are. So the hope is that it'll improve as time wears on. And the idea is then you have a basic system in place, then you can add batteries later on if you so wish, and you find out you're generating an awful lot more in the summer than you can use. It's a worthwhile investment. I know I live in the countryside, and we occasionally, rarely suffer from power cuts. So it's that's another great benefit, of course, having the battery. If you have energy stored in the battery and you have a power cut, you can automatically switch to the battery and have your power moving from there. Um,
So that's a really interesting point actually on the battery and power cuts. So it quite interestingly, a lot of people do believe that if the power goes, you can just sit there and it'll cut in like a generator in a hospital and so on. Turns out our restrictions in Ireland from an electricity supply perspective don't actually permit us to do that. So when the power goes down, what they don't want is your house still generating electricity and sending it off down the wires, so that John Murphy from the ESB goes up to fix it and gets electrocuted while he's up the pole. Um, so all of the systems that are installed in Ireland, when the power goes down, your system goes down too, including the battery. But there's ways around it. So a lot of these inverters that we spoke about, the hybrid inverters, have the ability to have an electricity output connected to it. The cheapest way to do it is just to plug in an extension lead and run it through your house. But you can get what's called a changeover switch fitted if your electrician installing is good. Now, changeover switch is basically a big switch in your fuse box that just says, I want to use power from the ESP, or I want to use power from my solar system. But it can't be both. It has to be one or the other. And the idea is then when your power goes down, you run out to your garage, you flip the changeover switch, and just as you say, Kieran, then the battery starts feeding the house and your lights and everything come back on at that stage. I'm in the same boat as you. I live rurally. I've had about 5 power cuts this year already, and there's definitely a sense of smug satisfaction when your power goes and you can go and flick the switch and continue watching TV and cooking your dinner.
So, but when you when you flick the changeover switch, so the changeover switch changes from your ESB normal input to the battery input. But when it's on the ESB normal input, it'll take first from the panels and then from the ESB. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, okay, okay. Have you any thoughts as to the and of course it's a question that a lot of people come up with, as to the payback time? I know it's going to vary, right, depending on the house and everything else. But what's your kind of default response to that question?
It's the first question everybody asks. How long do these things take to pay back? And I think it's actually really interesting because the point is it does pay back. So if you go and pour all your money into a kitchen, you've got a kitchen, but it never pays you back. If you go and buy a car, you've got a car, it never pays you back. You buy a solar system, it will pay you back every single cent you will put into it, and it will continue to make you money when you're done. So it's the only part of your house that will actually completely pay itself off and continue to pay to give you money. I think I am always challenged when people ask me, about payback, to think of anything else that will pretty much pay itself off. I think it's one of the shrewdest investments you can put into a house for that reason. The downside, of course, is it's a big chunk of change, and you're kind of wondering, right, when does that big chunk of change come back to me? Um, you touched on a very valid point of energy prices fluctuating. My original payback window, I thought the system that I installed, I spent about, for reference, I think I spent about 11,000 when I put my system in. And I thought originally it would take about 7 to 8 years to pay back. It looks like it's probably going to pay itself back in year 6 now at this stage with the current electricity prices. Um, and that's only taking into account, if I do basic calculations on the amount of energy I create and use in the home. Um, there are other ways to make even more savings. So if we go back to the battery that we were talking about, I have a battery installed. And what I can do on days like today where the weather isn't great is I can charge up that battery at nighttime using night rate electricity, which is cheaper. And then I can run the house during the day. And instead of paying peak electricity prices, it's running on that cheap night rate electricity. So it halves my electricity costs. So if you do that, it's what's called load shifting. And if you do that, your payback comes down even further. So yes, that's a catch 22 because you're paying more for the battery, but then it's also bringing down your payback window as well.
You're actually charging, you have the facility to charge your battery with night rate electricity from the SBE,
Yeah, yeah,
effectively.
yeah. It's great. If you actually, the worst thing about getting a solar system installed is you become obsessed with the weather. So you're checking your app all the time, going, "Is tomorrow going to be sunny? Is it not?" It's addictive. But when you're looking at a couple of days ahead, where you know it's going to be 3 or 4 dismal, dreary days, if you have a battery, you can just set that to charge overnight and continue to make savings that way.
And does everyone automatically have that facility, or do you need to specifically get an electrician or the photovoltaic company to set it up that way that you have the facility?
Nearly all of them would have it. So every system that comes will have some sort of interface to control it. That's either a panel on the front of it, or a website you log into, or an app on your phone. And you log into it, and you can tell the battery what you want it to do. So you can say, "Hey, tonight I want you to charge to 100%." Um, some people have it set so that your battery will never drop below 30% under any circumstances, so that if you do get a power cut, there's always some reserve there to run the home, right? So there's always an interface where you can log in and make those changes as long as you have a battery system installed.
And tell me, like the system, you broke it down in great detail there now today, and I certainly have a much better understanding. But the system itself, does it take much maintenance, or what's your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question too, because of course, we've all heard about solar panels that do require maintenance, and most of those, in fact, nearly all of those, are the older solar panels that produce hot water only. So every 3 or 4 years, you'd be sending somebody up there to replace the fluid inside in it and get any air bubbles out, like a radiator in a house, really. Um, but these solar panels, they're truthfully, there's no maintenance. They're solid state electronics inside them. The batteries are all solid state. There's no liquids or anything like that in those. So the whole system is essentially maintenance free. If something breaks, of course, that's where your warranty comes into it. But I think when you look at the warranty of the panels and you look at the warranty on the batteries, it kind of gives you a sense of reassurance that this stuff is here to be hassle free for as long as possible. I mean, the panels are all 20, 25-year warranties. Batteries are 10-year warranties. Does that mean they're going to stop after 10 years and 25 years? No, but it just means that the production might start to tail off a little bit, but you'll still be getting 90% production or 80% production after that time.
I think no, you did touch on something there that I think is well worth us clarifying. Is like people think of solar panels and they go, oh, so does it do electricity, or is it something to do with your heating? And of course, up to relatively recently, if you're getting solar panels on your roof, it was more for heating than electricity generating. So what we're talking about here today is the electricity generating photovoltaic version, as opposed to the hot water generating panels that were in vogue until quite recently. So I suppose that's an important distinction. I must say, I found this a fascinating discussion. I'm probably about halfway there, or I was at the start of the podcast with my photovoltaic knowledge, having done. I often get asked them by either clients or people on the podcast or on Instagram. I get asked a lot about them. And of course, with the energy crisis, I was having to upskill my own knowledge base on them and did an awful lot of research. And I say I'm in the process of getting them fitted myself in my own house. So I found it fascinating to talk to you about them, and I certainly learned an awful lot more, particularly about the. I think what I loved was the idea of you can actually charge the batteries, which are night rate electricity. With my own journey, it was a tricky one because I have just renovated an old house down at an old cottage down in West Cork, and with the renovation and extensions or whatever, there was a lot of flat roofs. And I didn't have south facing pitched roofs. I have a north facing pitched roof, which clearly is of no use to me. But I had a lot of south facing flat roofs, so I had a choice between either getting the flat roof systems or have them fitted in my garden. But my son plays a lot of hurling and football, and God knows what would happen. There definitely been some maintenance with those panels anyway, I can tell you, with him around. So we went for the flat roof system, and again, they're all south facing roofs. But then there was a big challenge because there were nice looking extensions, and I didn't want these solar panels to become features of the extensions when you'd stand on the ground. So there was a lot of work in actually getting the solar panels installed without kind of taking from the look of the extension. We've got there. We haven't fitted the batteries yet, basically because look, the price of the initial install was set us back a little bit, and we'll probably wait a season or two before fitting a battery or two. We have the hybrid inverter that you mentioned. I'm definitely more keen on fitting batteries now that I know about the fact that you can use the night rate electricity. That's a very interesting point which I never knew. But and I know there's so many people out there that are thinking about solar PV. I know I have a handful of clients. My father being one of them, who has my dad, who's 78, thank God, and he is fitting solar PV, has just fitted in his own house. So when you start thinking about people of that advanced age, and he's not even thinking about the payback, he's just thinking about getting it installed and hedging his energy bills to some extent. So that shows you how valuable they're becoming to the market, and they are really becoming something that is essential to a house build or a house renovation or retrofit. And I think they'll be with us for a long time to come. And I think in the future, eventually we'll be completely off the grid and we'll all be generating our own power. And I think,
You're right.
and a key part of that, of course, is having your house. Ideally, your only energy input is electric. So your heating is electric, which lends you towards the air to water end of it. I'm talking more on a new house or a deep retrofit house here now, clearly, and that you can generate that electricity through your photovoltaics. So I suppose that is the dream for us all. Some of us will probably get there earlier than others, but look, I suppose eventually that's the way things will eventually go. That's my view anyway, and I think that's where the future is.
I think you're right. And the more people that install solar, it fixes so many problems because the overall grid becomes an awful lot more self-sufficient. So not just your home, but the possibility of people having brownouts or blackouts decreases exponentially the more people that put solar in. We've seen the planning restrictions lift this year, and as you said, we've gone from a situation where nobody really knew about solar 2 or 3 years ago to everybody talking about it now. So it's going to become more and more prevalent. Long term, I think we'll see it become a requirement on new builds. So in the same way that we're seeing in the UK, for example, all new houses now have to have a car charger fitted. I think we're going to be ending up going down that road as well. It's just the whole idea of building an energy efficient home or retrofitting, as you said, a home to become energy efficient, and keeping your costs down. Yeah, it's going to become more prominent in the conversations we have about how we build our homes. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like we are now looking at electric cars, a lot of us, and we are now looking at the electricity being the only energy input of our homes. And if we can generate electricity, then look, effectively, we're driving off the grid and we're living off the grid. Um, so the idea is to have everything electrical, have your only source of energy being electric, and then to generate your own electricity in a green and energy efficient manner, which is where the photovoltaic come in. So that's the dream. So Owen, thanks very much for filling in all the many blanks I had on photovoltaic. I feel I definitely know a good bit more now than I did. And I'm even more convinced now that this really is the way forward for anyone who can afford it. And I think the more that can afford, the better. I think the government could probably do a little bit more even on the grants, because even though there is a grant of, I think, €2,400 to install, they've removed the grant for batteries, which was a pity, because I think anyone installing would ideally install a battery or two with it. So I think the government could do a little bit more on that. But look, it's certainly a fantastic investment. I think the only other investment that really generates income, albeit it's not as, you can't see it as quickly, is insulation, because the more insulation you have, the less energy you need to pour into your house to keep the heat that you're generating. So I suppose similarly, insulation is something that pays back forever. Although it's not as easy to work out exactly what that payback is. But look, a fascinating conversation. It's only a pity we don't have enough time for you to sit down and play us a song there in the background. I'm sure that would be a lovely ending to the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us. It's been a lovely, colourful conversation. I'm still admiring the backdrop here. It looks like the ultimate a Zoom wallpaper, but clearly it isn't. It's real life. Owen, thanks very much for joining us, and
Thanks again for the podcast. As I said, I've said it at the start of our conversation, but I would have killed for something this valuable when I was starting out my build. To be able to pop questions to an actual engineer on Instagram and get answers, it's fantastic. So thank you for creating the podcast. And even for me, I'm at the end of my build journey, but I'm still learning from it, which is great.
well, and thank you for your kind words. Lovely to talk to you. So that was Owen Kelly from Dunamore, just outside Blarney in County Cork. I think we've all learned an awful lot about photovoltaic panels at the tail end of that conversation. I certainly have. And I suppose the real thing to keep in mind here is, like, any house can get some level of photovoltaic as long as you have a south-facing roof. So again, it's not like an air-to-water system where you need a big, deep retrofit and spend thousands and thousands, and it may or may not be suitable for your house. If you have any level of a south-facing roof, be it a flat roof or a slope roof, you can get some level of photovoltaic for some level of investment and make some level of a saving on your house. And then you can add things like batteries, which will cost a little bit more, but again, you get to store more electricity that you generate in the summer, the excess. And of course, you can save on your hot water bills if you go for the hot water heating aspect, the eddy version of the system. So there are so many benefits there, and I think we'll all be looking at these benefits as time wears on. So thank you very much for joining me on this episode of the Build Around You podcast. I hope you found it as valuable as I have. I think we're all learning on each episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please send us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to the podcast, or even if you're listening to it on YouTube. I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Of course, every podcast drops every Sunday at 8 p.m. So until next Sunday at 8 p.m, speak to you then.